Before you click away thinking this is just another old Toyotas are reliable video, let me stop you for a second. Every car on this list comes from the same place. Mechanics who've spent decades under the hood, watching what actually survives, abuse, skipped maintenance, cheap parts, and owners who never read manuals. These aren't the Toyotas people brag about online. These are the ones mechanics quietly buy for themselves, drive into the ground, and then struggle to justify replacing. They're cheap right now, they're overlooked, and once you own one long enough, you understand why so many people never move on. Toyota Avalon, model years 2000 through 2004. Most people ignored this car when it was new. It didn't chase lap times, didn't look aggressive, and didn't pretend to be sporty. What it did instead was rack up mileage quietly, the kind of mileage mechanics respect because it shows up on odometers, not repair orders. This generation runs Toyota's 3.0-liter V6, good for just over 200 horsepower, paired with a straightforward automatic transmission that doesn't overcomplicate anything. In real-life driving, owners see low 20s on the highway, sometimes better on long, steady runs. Not flashy numbers, but honest ones that still hold up today. Back in the early 2000s, buyers often cross-shopped it against the Honda Accord V6, the Nissan Maxima, and the Buick LeSabre. The Accord felt sharper, but started developing transmission and interior wear issues as miles piled on. The Maxima drove like a muscle sedan until timing, chain tensioners, and automatic failures turned ownership stressful. The Buick delivered comfort, but intake gasket leaks and electrical problems became routine shop visits. The Avalon's advantage wasn't excitement, it was restraint. Mechanics will tell you these engines rarely come in for anything beyond scheduled service. Transmissions don't self-destruct. Cooling systems stay boring. The biggest problems tend to be age-related, worn suspension bushings, tired struts, and owners who skipped the timing belt service thinking Toyota meant immortal. That belt matters. Ignore it and the repair bill erases the bargain. Today, clean examples still trade around $4,000 to $6,000, often less than a similar Camry because demand is low and image never caught up with reality. That's the sweet spot. This car suits someone who values silence, space, and predictability over tech screens and sport modes. Live with one long enough and you start measuring other cars by how often they interrupt your life, which makes the next vehicle on this list feel smaller, cheaper, and somehow just as hard to replace. Toyota Corolla, model years 2005 through 2008. This is the car mechanics recommend when someone says, "I just need it to work," and they mean every single day. No drama, no learning curve, no personality crisis, just transportation that doesn't punish you for ignoring it a little longer than you should. Most of these came with the 1.8-liter four-cylinder, making around 130 horsepower, paired to either a simple automatic or a 5-speed manual that feels agricultural in the best way. Real-world fuel economy lands comfortably in the high 20s to low 30s, even with mixed driving. That mattered back then, and it matters even more now. In its time, this Corolla went head-to-head with the Honda Civic, the Ford Focus, and the Nissan Sentra. The Civic handled better and looked cooler, but suspension wear, cracked engine blocks on certain years, and pricier parts scared long-term owners. The Focus drove great until transmissions, wheel bearings, and electrical issues turned it into a frequent shop visitor. The Sentra offered space, but CVT failures later defined its reputation. What sets this Corolla apart is how little attention it demands. Timing chains instead of belts. Engines that tolerate abuse better than they should. Automatic transmissions that don't grenade at 150,000 miles. Mechanics often joke that the most common repair is replacing parts damaged by neglect, not bad engineering. Buyer mistakes still exist. Ignoring oil consumption on high-mileage engines is one, skipping suspension refreshes is another. These cars feel indestructible, so owners delay maintenance until the ride feels loose and noisy. Fix it early, and the car goes right back to being invisible. Prices today sit between $3,000 and $5,000 for solid examples, sometimes cheaper than flashier rivals with worse long-term prospects. This is the car for someone who wants low running costs, cheap insurance, and zero surprises. And once you realize how little stress a boring car can bring, it makes you wonder what happens when Toyota applies the same mindset to something that's actually built to work hard. All right, quick pause. Grab your phone, hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. It helps the channel way more than you think, and it keeps videos like this coming your way. Toyota Tacoma, model years 2005 through 2015. This is where mechanics stop talking and start nodding. Not because the Tacoma is perfect, but because they've seen what happens when a truck gets used like a truck for 10 or 15 years straight. Job sites, trailers, dirt roads, missed oil changes, and somehow it keeps showing up under its own power. Most buyers end up with a 4.0-liter V6 pushing just under 240 horsepower, paired with either a 6-speed manual or a 5-speed automatic that feels old even by mid-2000s standards. That's a compliment. Real-world fuel economy sits in the high teens, sometimes low 20s if you're gentle. Nobody buys one of these expecting miracles at the pump. Back then, the cross-shopping was obvious. The Ford Ranger was cheaper and simpler, but struggled with automatic transmissions and aging drivetrains. The first-generation Chevrolet Colorado promised refinement and delivered electrical problems and weak engines. The Nissan Frontier came closest, offering power and comfort, but still couldn't match long-term durability under abuse. Mechanics will tell you the Tacoma's biggest strength is how overbuilt it feels. Frames are stout, drivetrains tolerate stress, and parts availability is endless. The flip side? Frame rust in certain regions is real. You inspect underneath before you fall in love. Suspension components wear faster if the truck's lifted or overloaded. And some owners forget that reliability doesn't cancel out maintenance. The biggest buyer mistake is overpaying. Tacoma prices are stubborn, sometimes painfully so. Expect $8,000 to $12,000 for clean examples, more for four-wheel drive. Still, people pay it because replacements rarely feel like upgrades. This truck fits someone who needs reliability more than comfort, and resale more than novelty. Once you've owned one long enough, you stop asking what else is out there. Which makes it interesting that the next vehicle on this list delivers the same mechanical calm, but wrapped in something far more ordinary. Toyota Camry V6, model years 2004 through 2006. Picture this instead. You're late, the road is empty, and you lean into the throttle expecting noise and protest. What you get is a smooth surge forward and nothing else. No drama, no vibration, no warning lights later that week. That's the Camry V6 experience from this era, and it's exactly why mechanics trust it. Under the hood sits Toyota's 3.0-liter V6, making around 210 horsepower, backed by an automatic transmission that rarely shows up in shops unless it's been seriously neglected. Fuel economy lands in the low 20s on the highway, which surprised a lot of buyers back then who assumed V6 meant expensive to live with. When new, this car was often compared to the Honda Accord V6, the Nissan Altima V6, and the Ford Fusion V6. The Accord felt sportier but developed transmission concerns in earlier years and cost more to keep perfect. The Altima offered strong acceleration, but long-term reliability and interior quality didn't age as gracefully. The Fusion looked modern, yet early drivetrain and electrical issues sent many back to the dealer. What makes this Camry different is balance. It doesn't excel at one thing loudly, but it does everything consistently. Mechanics rarely see internal engine failures. Cooling systems stay stable. Electronics don't become a guessing game. The common issues are predictable. Oil sludge, if oil changes were skipped, worn motor mounts, and aging suspension components. Market prices today sit between $5,000 and $7,000, depending on condition. Many buyers overlook these V6 models because they blend in visually, which is exactly why they remain such a strong buy. This car suits someone who wants quiet power and zero surprises, someone who values calm competence over flash. And once you've experienced that kind of stability in a sedan, it makes you wonder how the same philosophy feels when lifted higher off the ground. Toyota Highlander, model years 2001 through 2007. Nobody bought this thinking it would become a long-term relationship. It was supposed to be a practical phase. Kids, groceries, snow days, maybe a light trailer once in a while. Yet mechanics keep seeing the same thing. Owners coming in after 15 years asking what it would take to keep it going a little longer. Most of the good ones run the 3.0 or 3.3-liter V6, making between 220 and 230 horsepower, tied to a conservative automatic transmission. Real-world fuel economy lands in the high teens to low 20s, depending on drivetrain and driving style. Not impressive on paper, but remarkably consistent over time. In the early 2000s, this Highlander was cross-shopped against the Honda Pilot, the Ford Explorer, and the Nissan Pathfinder. The Pilot offered space and power, but early transmissions and suspension wear shortened its stress-free years. The Explorer sold in massive numbers, then paid for it with transmission failures and rear suspension issues. The Pathfinder felt rugged, yet cooling system and drivetrain problems became common past 100,000 miles. The Highlander never tried to be tough. That's why it survived. Car-based platform, lighter weight, simpler all-wheel drive systems. Mechanics will tell you these engines rarely suffer catastrophic failures. What they do see are worn struts, aging oxygen sensors, and owners skipping timing belt services thinking SUVs are indestructible. They're not. Belts matter here. The biggest buyer mistake today is ignoring condition in favor of mileage. A well-maintained 200,000-mile Highlander is often safer than a neglected one with half that. Prices sit around $5,000 to $8,000, and clean examples don't stay listed long. This is the vehicle for someone who wants space without punishment, reliability without theatrics. And once you've lived with one long enough, replacing it feels less like an upgrade and more like starting over. Which brings us back to why mechanics keep recommending these old Toyotas in the first place. They don't impress you once, they convince you every single day. At some point, you stop shopping for cars and start looking for peace. Fewer surprises, fewer repair conversations, fewer moments wondering if today's the day something expensive fails. That's where these old Toyotas live. They aren't exciting anymore, and that's the point. They've already proven themselves in real traffic, real winters, real neglect, and real ownership. Mechanics don't recommend them because they're perfect. They recommend them because they're predictable, fixable, and honest. If you're buying something to keep, not to flip, these are the kinds of vehicles that quietly earn your trust year after year. And once you understand that, newer doesn't always feel better anymore.